A mother is just like an angel for her children, but this angel will turn into a devil if you try to harm her children. A mother became a killer at her daughter's murder trial. She took justice into her own hands and became known as the country's infamous revenge mother. This grieving mother walked right up to the accused and shot him to death in front of the judge. Who was she? Why did she kill that person? Did she deserve the sentence she was given? Today's case is about a mother who became a vigilante after her daughter was abducted and murdered. So let's talk a little bit more about today's case. So it was 1980 in Germany. The Bachmeier family lived in Lübeck. This was Marianne, who was 29 years old and a mother to her 7-year-old daughter Anna. Marianne was a single mother who worked as a waitress for a local bar and restaurant called De Patza, and Anna was a happy, open-minded, free-spirited child who was born on November 14, 1972. Anna was in elementary school at the time, and she spent a lot of her time alone playing outside. On May 5, 1980, 7-year-old Anna decided that she was not going to go to school. She and her mother had gotten into an argument that day, and Anna was upset. She wanted to just go and see a friend instead of going to school, so she left the house that morning so that her mother wouldn't know she didn't go to school, and she ended up going to see if her friend was home. Her friend had gone to school, though she ended up just walking around aimlessly doing whatever she wanted. However, she would never be seen alive again. Her mother worked mostly nights, so she would often sleep during the day while Anna was in school. So she was unaware that her daughter was missing and that she had never made it to school that day. So she woke up in the afternoon because she had a photo shoot for a newspaper because she had this really cool Volkswagen van that was covered in paintings, and this journalist wanted to cover a story about it, and she was going to the photo shoot that afternoon. Then she returned and noticed that Anna was not home from school, nor was she coming home at all. She was searching the area, but she also thought that Anna might just be at a friend's house. Anna was not at any of her friends' houses. When it turned dark, that's when she decided to go to the police. Her friends did not know where she had gone. No one had actually seen her at all, or at least they weren't claiming to. But what no one knew at the time was that Anna had actually been abducted and taken inside the kidnapper's house. She was there for hours before being killed, stashed in a cardboard box, and left at the bank of a canal in a shallow grave. Now a question arises: who was the kidnapper? What happened that day? On that day, she went to say hello to her neighbor, who often let her play with his cat. So on this day, when she asked to play with the cat, it was a 35-year-old butcher named Klaus Grabowski. A few days later, a woman would walk into the police department the afternoon after she had vanished, and she would tell the police what her fiancé had done. She told the police that the man she was planning to marry confessed to murdering Anna Bachmeier. The woman said that he confessed to her that he had seen Anna walking across the street that day. Klaus took her up to his apartment. She told the police that the man she was planning to marry confessed to murdering Anna Bachmeier. With this confession and the confirmed missing girl, they rushed over to Klaus's apartment, and there they found a note that was roughly translated from German to English. He wrote in his note that he had been waiting to give his fiancée a hug, that he needed courage now, and that he would be waiting at a local restaurant so that they could talk. She said when she left to talk to the police, he was actually taking Anna in a cardboard box in order to put her on a bike and bury her. So investigators immediately headed to the spot of this restaurant that Klaus had mentioned and made sure that the woman didn't actually show up so that they could arrest him. They were waiting for him to arrive, not knowing if he would, and thankfully he did, so they arrested him immediately. Klaus confessed to Anna's murder, claiming that he had strangled her with a pair of his fiancée's pants. Investigators strongly believed, though, that the motive here was to do with a possible sexual assault of the child. However, Klaus adamantly denied this. Instead, he said that Anna tried to blackmail him, that she tried to seduce him, and that she threatened him that she would tell her mom that he had molested her if he didn't give her money. So he said that while she sat on the chair, he was behind her and strangled her with the pants as she fought for her life. She was falling off the chair, and he continued to tighten the stockings until she was dead. Then he said he had found the right spot to bury her. Anna's remains were located at the canal where Klaus had confessed, and her body had been hogtied. Marianne then refused to identify the body. Now, why has a mother refused to identify her daughter's body? She didn't want to talk to the police, and investigators began to get really suspicious of her behavior, never seeing this from a victim's parent before. She was said to be distraught, and she would have many breakdowns in the following months. At Anna's funeral, Marianne and Anna's father, Christian, would actually have their friends record a Pink Floyd song to play, and everyone was wearing bright colors to make Anna happy. But her killer, Klaus Grabowski, was the opposite of a good Samaritan. He was their neighbor, but he was the neighbor everyone should have feared. This was not the first time that Klaus was in trouble. A decade prior, in 1973, he was charged with the attempted murder of a 6-year-old girl. He had tried to sexually assault her, but she ran away screaming from him. He chased her and began to strangle her, but this brave girl would not stop screaming, and so he ended up having to run away so that he wouldn't be caught, but he was ultimately caught for this. But 2 years later, he was said to have sexually assaulted 2 9-year-old girls and was placed in a psychiatric facility. When he was taken to court for these charges, his doctor said that he had an addiction to his abnormal sexual instinct and that without medical treatment, there was a risk that such acts would be repeated. Now, Klaus actually chose castration over a prison sentence and was released right after with no monitoring, no parole, just letting go. And 5 years later, he murdered a 7-year-old girl. The trial began on March 3rd, 1981, in a very tiny courtroom, and Marianne sat in the front row and often shouted at Klaus. It had been found that after his chemical castration, which can be reversed, Klaus had started hormone therapy to reverse it 2 years prior to Anna's murder. So with this, his lawyers began to claim that he murdered her because of his hormonal imbalance, and the doctor who allowed this to occur to somebody who had been chemically castrated for his sexually violent crimes had to come and testify, and he said that he allowed the hormone therapy because he didn't know that it had anything to do with crimes, and he didn't look into it either. 3 days into the trial on March 6th, it was said to be an unusually warm day. The courtroom wasn't as packed as it had once been in the first 3 days, because Klaus had confessed to the murder and pleaded guilty. So there weren't as many people, not as much media. However, Marianne would be going every single day, and strangely enough, she walked into the courtroom this day with a green coat with her. She was holding it, and she sat it on her lap. And it was said that she walked into the courtroom once, left, and then came back once again. And to the surprise of everyone in that courtroom, around 10 a.m., Marianne would walk over to where Klaus was sitting with his back to her, waiting for the trial to resume. And she would pull up a gun and aim it at his back, shooting 8 times. 7 of those hit him. The .22 caliber Beretta 70 would cause Klaus to slump over onto his desk and then fall to the floor, bleeding profusely. There were no metal detectors, no means of security to keep weapons out of the courtroom, and no one to stop a mother from avenging her daughter. It wasn't thought of like this in the 1980s. But Marianne didn't try to escape. Knowing that her daughter's killer was most likely dead, she threw the gun to the floor, put her hands up, and waited to be arrested. She allegedly said that, "At this time I wanted to kill him. I wanted to shoot him in the face. Unfortunately, I hit him in the back. I hope he's dead." She said it was for Anna and me. "Soon I will be with her." She became known in the media as the Revenge Mother, and Klaus was taken out of the courtroom, where they tried to get him medical attention, but it was too late, and he would leave a trail of blood. With so many wanting to know why Marianne would do this before the killer actually became the killer, he was just accused at this point. He wasn't actually deemed the killer, and so many wondered why she would take justice into her own hands. But a lot of other people understood instantly, especially mothers. They were supporting her. They understood from the very beginning why she would do this and accepted it. But a lot was found out about Marianne and her past. She was born on June 3rd, 1950, in a refugee camp. Her father, Joseph, had actually been in the military as a Nazi officer. It was said that he was an extremely strict alcoholic and that her mother, Hannah, was extremely religious. Marianne was said not to fit in with the family at all. She was free-spirited. She was often getting into trouble, and eventually her father did leave her mother, who would remarry. However, her stepfather was actually worse than her father. He was a man named Paul Wise who was a professional wrestler and truck driver, and he was told to do things like create a garden outside their home and tell Marianne she couldn't play in it. She refused to call him her stepfather and called him Uncle Paul instead. He then began to physically abuse her, and it was said to just be a very violent, toxic household. But as a teenager, Marianne fell in love. She snuck out of the house to meet him all the time, and at 16, Marianne became pregnant. She was then kicked out of the house by her stepfather, and her mother actually had to secretly get a room for her so she could stay somewhere. Her sisters would bring her meals every single day. After Marianne gave birth, she was allowed back home, where the baby was sleeping on the kitchen table, and eventually her stepfather would place her in a home for unmarried mothers. Her boyfriend then broke up with her, and she decided to give the baby up for adoption. 2 years later, she was pregnant again with another boyfriend's baby, and he proposed, but she actually refused. She was still deciding if she wanted to keep the baby at all when she was sexually assaulted by a stranger. She sent the man to trial for this, and afterwards he was sent to a reform home by her stepfather. And while there and still pregnant, she attempted suicide. Thankfully, she and the baby survived, and her stepfather then randomly died. And so she had this baby, and she moved back in with her mother. She allegedly called this baby Christina, and so she was raising Christina for a while. She was said to fall in love again with a man named Christian, and they kind of had an on-again, off-again relationship. Eventually, she got pregnant again by Christian, and he was said to be delighted with the news. However, she wanted to go back to her ex. Her ex then tried to rape her, and then dumped her to find her own way home. Now Christian, her boyfriend that she had just left, started fighting all of the time. And so Christina, the baby that she had had with that ex, didn't really have the best home life. And so Marianne decided to give the baby up to Christina's father's parents. And then, Marianne and Christian still had this baby that they were having together. Marianne was 22 at this point, and Christian owned a local bar. So the two began working there during the nights, and they would actually work opposite shifts so they could take care of the bar and make the most money. But Christian then forced Marianne to marry a chef they had at the restaurant because he was facing being deported. Now, I'm not really sure what happened with this marriage, but at this point, Marianne and Christian's relationship was more like that of business partners. They sold the first bar and opened a second. They really weren't this loving couple, and Marianne had Anna and then decided to get her tubes tied because she did not want to have any more children. So Marianne was pretty much a single mother of Anna at this point, and because of this, she often brought Anna to her job, which unfortunately was at a bar where lots of the people who would go there would say that Anna was often sleeping on benches. She would fall asleep at school because she was up all night, and Anna would go and see Christian, who still owned the other half of the bar, and would hang out with him, but he didn't want full custody of her either. It was said that when Marianne was home from work during the day, she was sleeping, even if Anna was home, so Anna would be playing outside by herself often, and this didn't really bother Anna because it was all she knew. She would go around finding things to do and talking to other people, especially the neighbors. But Marianne knew that she was not being the best mom, and she was actually speaking to a married couple she knew about them taking in Anna as a foster child temporarily. This was still in the works, it wasn't anything confirmed when she was murdered. That day, Marianne had no idea she was missing as she slept, but it was said to greatly affect her afterward, thinking back on the fact that she let her daughter go out alone, and also the fact that they had argued before she was murdered. But now she was the killer on trial for the murder of her daughter's killer, and while awaiting trial, she allegedly tried to take her life 5 different times. She was said to refuse to talk to the psychologist, even when they tried to break her down to get her to open up. She was kept in a psychological facility until sentencing, and her lawyer said that she was in a very turbulent mental state. But on November 2nd, 1982, Marianne was on trial for murder. It was a madhouse, with the media and the public all wanting to hear about what was going to occur. Marianne wasn't said to be afraid of the cameras. She walked confidently. She didn't appear frail or afraid at all. Many women came to support her, especially mothers, and they were angry that she had to stand trial at all. Marianne did do an exclusive interview with Stern magazine that was her whole life story for around $1.6 million today, and this was allegedly to pay for her legal fees. This is how we know so much about her childhood, because she actually told this magazine all about it. But the public, some of them, was torn between understanding her actions and condoning them, because the question was it premeditated or not? If we let this vigilante killer go free, what does that show everybody else? So this is what would be discussed for the next 25 days at her trial. Thousands were donating to her. They were trying to send her flowers. In fact, there was allegedly one bouquet with a note that said, "For you, from a grandfather who would have done the same. You were not alone." But as more came out, especially about her childhood, where she actually gave that information to the magazine, people began to flip on her. They were saying that she was actually a neglectful mother, and that this wasn't the revenge mother of a mother who loved her daughter. It was believed that Marianne didn't care much about her daughter until her tragic murder. During her testimony, Marianne claimed to have dreamt about killing Klaus, seeing visions of her daughter in the courtroom, and being unable to bear Klaus's lies about her daughter any longer. She stated that she retrieved the gun from someone at the bar and had hidden it in Anna's grave for self-defense, denying any premeditation to murder. Marianne confessed to taking the gun to Klaus's trial daily and deciding impulsively to kill him. A doctor testified about Marianne's handwriting sample, where she wrote, "I did it for you, Anna," along with 7 hearts symbolizing the 7 years of Anna's life. Additionally, Anna's father, Christian, was heard acknowledging Marianne's act in the courtroom. Psychologists argued that killing Klaus was akin to killing Marianne herself, suggesting profound psychological trauma. Considering these factors, the judge concluded that Marianne wasn't a societal threat and that her actions were spontaneous due to the trauma of the court hearing. Consequently, the prosecution dropped the murder charge, and on March 2, 1983, Marianne was sentenced to 6 years for premeditated manslaughter. She served only 3 years and was placed on probation for another 2 years and 10 months. A survey revealed mixed public opinions on Marianne's sentence. Marianne and Christian attempted to sue the doctor responsible for Klaus's hormone therapy, but the lawsuit was dismissed. After her release, Marianne married a German schoolteacher and relocated to Nigeria. Their marriage ended in the 1990s, and Marianne moved to Sicily, where she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 1994. She returned to Germany and gave TV and radio interviews, expressing conflicting emotions about Klaus's death. Some speculated that her actions were driven by a desire for attention, evidenced by her request to document her final days. Marianne passed away on September 17, 1996, at the age of 46, and was buried alongside Anna. Opinions about the revenge mother vary widely. Some view her as a grieving mother seeking justice for her daughter, while others criticize her actions as attention-seeking and premeditated. Ultimately, Marianne's story raises complex questions about justice, grief, and the lengths to which a parent may go to protect their child. Take care of yourself and your loved ones, and stay tuned for more intriguing true crime documentaries.